I could always tell when something was wrong with Stephanie. Even before all of this, I knew the little quirks that gave her away. How she bit her lip when she was nervous, how her voice got just a little too casual when she was lying. We had been together for 7 years, married for 4. And for the most part, I thought we were solid. Until the changes started. At first, they were small. The kind of things you don't think twice about. She started staying late at work more often, saying she had deadlines to meet. She got a new perfume, something floral and light, something she never used to wear. And then there was her phone. Stephanie had always been a little private with her phone, but now, it was practically glued to her hand. She'd angle the screen away from me, turn off notifications, and take calls in another room. When I asked her about it, she just laughed it off. "It's just work stress, babe," she'd say. "I need some space." And I believed her. At least I tried to. But then the excuses started piling up. One night she came home late, really late. I was sitting on the couch, waiting, half watching some random show. When she finally walked in, her makeup was smudged, and she looked flustered. "Got caught up at the office," she said quickly. "Didn't even have time for dinner." I glanced at her, then at the time. 11:47 p.m. And that was the first time I felt it. That gnawing feeling deep in my gut. Something was wrong. I didn't push her that night, but I started watching more closely. Not in a paranoid way, just little things. The way she suddenly seemed more interested in her appearance. The way she smiled at her phone when she thought I wasn't looking. And the way, on some nights, she came home smelling like a man's cologne that definitely wasn't mine. I told myself I was imagining things, that I was being ridiculous. But then, one evening, I found something that changed everything. A receipt. It was crumpled up in the pocket of her coat, carelessly tossed in like it didn't matter. I almost ignored it, but something told me to check. And when I did, my stomach twisted into knots. A reservation for 2. At a fancy restaurant across town. 2 nights ago. The same night she told me she was working late. I sat there staring at it, my mind racing. My hands shook, but I forced myself to stay calm. Maybe there was an explanation. Maybe, but deep down I already knew. Stephanie was hiding something, and I was going to find out what. I didn't confront her right away. I wanted to, believe me. Every muscle in my body was screaming to throw the receipt in her face and demand answers. But I knew if she was lying, she'd be ready with another one. Another excuse. Another way to make me doubt my own instincts. So I waited, and I watched. The next evening, I casually mentioned that I was thinking about taking her to that same restaurant for our anniversary. I even named it, just to see how she'd react. Stephanie barely looked up from her phone. "Oh, that place? I heard it's kind of overrated." Overrated? 2 nights ago, she had a dinner for 2 there. But now, suddenly, it wasn't worth her time? I forced a smile and let it go. Over the next few days, I noticed more cracks forming in her carefully constructed lies. One night, I asked her to pick up some milk on her way home from work. She told me she forgot. But when she dumped her bag onto the couch, a fresh bottle of milk rolled out. Another time, I asked her what she had for lunch, just casually. She said sushi. Later that night, I found a crumpled fast food wrapper in her car. It was all small things. Things a trusting husband might have overlooked. But I wasn't that man anymore. Then came the worst part. One night, she was in the shower, and her phone buzzed on the nightstand. Normally, I wouldn't have looked, but this time, I did. The message was from an unsaved number. "Had an amazing time. Can't wait for next time." Winking face. My throat went dry. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding so loud I swore she'd hear it over the running water. My hands felt numb. I don't even remember putting the phone down, but somehow I did. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor. My mind was racing. I wanted to be wrong. I wanted to believe there was an explanation. But there wasn't, was there? She was cheating. I should have confronted her right then. I should have kicked open that bathroom door and demanded the truth. But I didn't. Instead, I did something I never thought I would. I started planning. Planning to catch her. To make her admit it. And most of all, to make sure she never saw it coming. I spent the next few days playing the role of the clueless husband. I still kissed Stephanie goodbye in the mornings, still asked about her day, still laughed at her jokes. But inside, I was a storm. I needed proof. Real proof. Something undeniable. Because I knew how this would go. If I confronted her without it, she'd twist the story, gaslight me, make me feel crazy. So I dug deeper. I started checking our shared finances, looking for any charges that didn't add up. There it was, hotel transactions, extra Uber rides, more dinner reservations. She wasn't even careful about hiding it. And then the final piece fell into place. One evening, Stephanie told me she was going to a girls' night. I knew it was a lie before the words even left her mouth. I just smiled. Have fun, babe. As soon as she left, I followed. She wasn't hard to track. She took an Uber straight to a hotel downtown. My heart was hammering so hard I could barely breathe, but I forced myself to stay calm. I waited a few minutes, then walked in like I belonged there. I knew what room she was in. I had seen the hotel charge on our bank statement earlier that day. I took the elevator up, my stomach twisting with every floor. When I reached the door, I hesitated. This was it. I could hear muffled voices inside. Laughter. A man's voice. Hers. My hands clenched into fists. I could have barged in right then, but I didn't. No, I wanted something better. Something that would destroy whatever twisted fantasy she was living in. So I stepped away, pulled out my phone, and snapped a picture of the door. The room number. The do not disturb sign she'd hung outside. Then, I turned and walked away. She had no idea what was coming. I barely slept that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the silence of our home. Our home, the one she had turned into a playground for her lies. At 2:34 a.m., Stephanie finally came back. I heard the front door click shut, her heels clicking softly against the floor. She moved carefully, probably thinking I was asleep. I wasn't. She slipped into bed beside me, her body still carrying traces of wherever the hell she had been. I forced myself to breathe evenly, to keep my hands relaxed. If she noticed me tensing up, she'd get suspicious. I wanted her to think she'd gotten away with it. The next morning, I played my role. I kissed her on the forehead before work, told her I'd be home early to cook dinner. She smiled, completely unaware of what I had planned. I was going to make her dinner, all right? A dinner she'd never forget. The day crawled by. I went through the motions at work, but my mind was already at home, setting the pieces in place. When I got off, I stopped by the store, picking up everything I needed. Every ingredient, every little detail had to be perfect. I wanted her to feel safe when she walked through that door. I wanted her to sit down at the table, thinking nothing was wrong. Then I'd serve her the meal, and watch her world fall apart. At 7 p.m., she walked in. "Something smells amazing," Stephanie said, dropping her bag by the door. I smiled. "Figured I'd surprise you." She walked over, wrapped her arms around me from behind, and kissed my neck. I fought every instinct to pull away. Instead, I just kept stirring the pot. "What's on the menu?" she asked, leaning over my shoulder. And that's when I turned, looked her right in the eye. "Dinner for two." She didn't react at first, just blinked, like she didn't quite understand. But then I pulled out the envelope and placed it on the counter. "Go ahead," I said. "Take a look." Her face paled. She hesitated, then slowly picked up the envelope and slid out the contents. The hotel receipt, the dinner reservations, the picture of the hotel room door, and then the photo I took just minutes ago. A snapshot of our dining table, perfectly set for two. But instead of plates, I had placed two printed-out screenshots of her messages with him. Stephanie's breath hitched. She looked at me, eyes wide. Go on," I said, my voice eerily calm. "You asked what was for dinner." Her hands trembled. "It's not." I let out a sharp laugh. "Don't. Just don't." She swallowed hard, looking at the evidence in front of her. The air in the kitchen had gone thick, suffocating. I could see it in her eyes, the realization that I knew everything. And for the first time since all of this started, She had nothing to say. Stephanie's hands shook as she set the papers down, her eyes darting between me and the damning evidence spread out on the table. The air between us was electric, thick with unspoken words, the weight of betrayal pressing down like a storm about to break. "I can explain," she whispered. I laughed, a real, sharp, humorless laugh. "Oh, I'd love to hear this one." I pulled out a chair and sat down, arms crossed. "Go ahead. Explain how you've been sneaking around behind my back. Explain the late nights, the hotel rooms, the text messages. Explain why you let me sit here like an idiot, cooking you dinner, while you were out with him." She opened her mouth, closed it, then shook her head. It's not what you think." I leaned forward. "Then what is it, Stephanie? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks exactly like what I think." Her face was a mess of emotions. Fear, guilt, maybe even anger that she had been caught. "It was a mistake," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I never meant for it to go this far." I scoffed. "A mistake? A mistake is forgetting to pick up the dry cleaning. You don't accidentally end up in hotel rooms with someone else." She ran a hand through her hair, her breath shaky. "I wasn't happy, okay?" I went still. Not happy. That was the excuse, the cliché, the go-to justification for tearing a marriage apart. I clenched my jaw. "So instead of talking to me, instead of telling me what was wrong, you decided to screw around behind my back? I didn't plan for this to happen, but it did." I leaned back, exhaling slowly. "So who is he?" Stephanie flinched. "Does it matter?" My hand curled into a fist on the table. "It matters." She hesitated, then looked down. "You don't know him." I let out a slow breath through my nose, forcing myself to stay calm. "Funny. I'm pretty sure I do." I pulled out my phone, tapped the screen, and turned it toward her. Her eyes widened as she saw the picture I had pulled up. A photo of her mystery man, my best friend. Stephanie's face turned white as she stared at the screen. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. She had nothing. "You thought I wouldn't figure it out?" My voice was calm, eerily so. "You thought I wouldn't notice how he suddenly started pulling away from me? How he'd make excuses when I invited him over? Or how you both avoided each other when I was around? Like two guilty kids who broke a lamp." She swallowed hard. I didn't." I slammed my fist on the table, making her flinch. "Don't lie to me, Stephanie. Not anymore." She looked like she wanted to run. Her fingers twitched at her side. Her breath came in short, panicked bursts. "It didn't mean anything," she choked out. "I swear it meant enough for you to risk everything." Silence. She had nothing to say because she knew I was right. I stood up, pushing the chair back. My pulse was pounding, but I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of seeing me break. "You asked what was for dinner," I said, my voice steady. I gestured to the table, where her betrayal was laid out for both of us to see. "This is it. The truth. Served cold." She didn't move. I let the moment stretch, watching as she crumbled under the weight of everything she had done. Then I grabbed my jacket, walked to the door, and turned back one last time. "Enjoy your meal." And with that, I walked out, leaving her to choke on every last lie she ever fed me. I didn't go back that night. I didn't answer her calls, didn't read her texts, didn't bother to hear whatever half-baked apology she tried to come up with. Instead, I drove. No destination in mind, just the open road and the steady hum of the engine beneath me. My mind was a blur, replaying everything, the lies, the deception, the look on her face when she realized I knew everything. That part had felt good. But now, sitting alone in a motel room a few towns over, the weight of it all settled on me. The anger was still there, burning low, but beneath it, the hurt, because no matter how much I wanted to pretend otherwise, I had loved her. Maybe I still did in some twisted way. And knowing she had thrown that love away so easily, that stung more than anything. The next morning I called a lawyer. Divorce was the only option. There was no fixing this, no going back to the way things were. Even if I wanted to, how could I ever trust her again? When I finally returned home that evening, Stephanie was waiting for me. Her eyes were red, her face drawn with exhaustion. "Where did you go?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I walked past her without a word, heading straight to the bedroom. I grabbed a suitcase from the closet and started packing. "Please, can we talk?" she tried again, stepping closer. "I know I hurt you, but I turned, cutting her off with a look. "You made your choice, Stephanie. This is mine." Tears welled in her eyes. "I don't want to lose you." I let out a hollow laugh. "You lost me the second you chose him." She broke then, sobbed, said she was sorry, that she had made a mistake, that she wished she could take it back. But it was too late. I grabbed my things, walked to the door, and didn't look back. The divorce was messy. She tried to fight it, begged for another chance, even blamed him for manipulating her. But I wasn't interested in her excuses. As for my so-called best friend, I made sure he lost more than just my friendship. A few well-placed words to the right people, and suddenly his perfect little life started crumbling too. His girlfriend found out. His job found out. Turns out, companies don't take too kindly to employees sneaking around with married women on company time. Last I heard, he was barely scraping by. Stephanie? She tried reaching out a few times. Sent me long, emotional emails about how much she regretted everything, how she wasn't thinking straight. I never responded, because I was done. I walked away from that marriage with nothing but my dignity intact. And honestly, that was enough. Now, months later, I'm rebuilding. I've started traveling more, seeing old friends, focusing on myself for the first time in years. And you know what? Feels damn good. Stephanie once asked me what was for dinner. I gave her the truth. And in the end, she was the one left hungry.